Hi, I'm Gary Schuster, your friendly neighborhood inventor, and this is Innovation Cafe. Today, I want to talk about the innovation principles. Now, this isn't something that I've read elsewhere. This is something I am coming up with in conjunction with a book I'm writing about invention. Now, as someone with a bunch of patents, 250, I don't know, it's a lot. I found that there are certain things that I do. And in working with other inventors, I found that there are certain things that they do that seem to be common. So common principles across different types of innovation, inventors, authors, musicians. A lot of these things are shared. Right now, the experiment I'm going to run is I'm going to talk about the innovation principles that I've come up with so far. And as I continue to write the book, they're going to change, and I'm going to do subsequent episodes where I further refine them. And eventually you'll get to see part of the process of innovation, which is I'm innovating to come up with these principles. The first one is really pretty simple. Use disinhibition to help you make connections. Disinhibited states are particularly good for being creative. So some of them are the obvious ones that you'd think of, which is, you're halfway asleep and you're disinhibited as a result. Now, another way to become disinhibited is to practice meditation. Now, I know that there are a lot of hard scientists out there, studied, organic chemistry or particle physics their whole life. And it may seem a bit hippy-dippy, but it's not. Another one is kind of related, mindfulness. Just be aware of what's going on, be intentional in your efforts to be creative. The second big category is reframing how you think about problems. Okay? So instead of saying, this is just going to suck, or I have to live with it, or I guess I have writer's block today, or whatever it is, say, I'm going to solve this. I'm going to get over this writer's block. I'm going to come up with that great photography idea. Just commit to it. And you don't have to solve it right away, but you do have to commit to solving it, and then you'll eventually solve it. There are a few other ways to refine how you think about problems. Okay? One of them is just from Apple's ad campaign, Think Different. Just try to think in a different route than you normally take. For me, my normal thought process is, kind of scattered, non-linear. I try to connect things together. But, so for me, it can help with creativity to just try to think more linearly, because that's not normally how I think. And if you normally think kind of linear, like, doing the alphabet from A to Z in order, maybe try doing it a little bit out of order. Look at F, and then what's A got going, and Z. And, we thought about G, right? So change how you're approaching a problem. Try to get outside of your normal method of thinking. Embrace neurodiversity. Neurodiversity is a superpower. Most inventors have some form of neurodiversity going on, and it comes back to thinking different. If you're different in how your neurology is constructed than the person sitting next to you, you're both going to approach a problem in a different way, and you'll have different solutions. Imagination is more important than knowledge. And I'm not coming up with this saying, it's been around for a while, but it's absolutely true. And I'll go even a step further. I'll say too much knowledge is a very bad thing for innovation. Knowledge about what's possible, great, gather as much of it as you can. But with that knowledge of what's possible comes at best an implied list of things that are impossible, and at worst, explicit instruction as to what can't be done. So knowing too much on the what can't be done side is not helpful at all, and definitely imagination is better than that. But you can pair imagination with positive knowledge about what can be achieved and then expand beyond it. The next thing is, and it's a really funny one, identifying things that can be improved, identifying problems to be solved. Now, it sounds weird, right? Because inventors are supposed to be solving problems, not finding problems. But it turns out that there are a lot of times where there is a solution for a problem that people haven't even realized they want solved yet. So people have just learned to live with things that they would prefer be different. We lived with having to walk messages to our neighbor's house in the days before phones. We lived with a lot of things that we just didn't see as problems until someone came up with a solution to them. So identify what you can solve. Now, interestingly, and this is sort of the patent nerd part, so you can fast forward by like 30 seconds if you're not a patent nerd, but the standard is the solution to the problem has to not be obvious. Well, here's something really weird. Sometimes the problem itself is the most non-obvious thing of the entire venture. And once you have the problem clearly set out in front of you, the solution is often pretty easy. Now, I think it still qualifies as a non-obvious solution because the problem and solution can't really be separated, right? If you identify the problem with enough specificity, you're pretty much describing the answer by describing the problem sometimes. The next category is the subconscious, and I did a couple of videos on this, but the subconscious is massively parallel in how it can process things. It can work on, tens of thousands of different things at the same time, and let your subconscious do the heavy lifting. So dedicate yourself to, I'm going to solve this problem, and then just listen for the solution, because it might take a week, it might take a day, it might happen right away, but let your subconscious crank on it while maybe you're doing other things. A lot of times people say, oh, I came up with the idea in the shower. Well, yeah, you were probably disinhibited because you're just showering, you're not thinking about anything in particular. And, through that disinhibition, your subconscious was able to say, hey, you remember that thing you told me about? Yeah, I've got a solution. Another thing to do is identification of anomalies. What do I mean by that? Well, something different, something you weren't expecting. Now, it can be a mental anomaly. Why am I thinking about this when I'm working on that? Well, maybe there's a connection. Pay attention to it. Your brain might be trying to tell you something, and that's, again, your subconscious trying to tell you something. There may be sensory anomalies where something, as you're working on a project, something feels odd. Think the development of the microwave oven, where someone was working with microwaves and all of a sudden noticed that the chocolate bar in their pocket was getting too warm. So, pay attention to what's going on around you. Factual anomalies, where something just doesn't fit with the world as you understand it to be. All of those things are important factors in innovation. So what's another one? It's maybe my favorite saying ever, and it's mine. Know enough to know what's possible, but not so much that you think you know what's impossible. It's just a way to live. I mean, you don't need to have a list of things you can't do, because more often than not, there are things on the list of things that are impossible that are actually not impossible. Another way to do it, another approach to innovation, is structured creativity. Now, it doesn't mean maybe what you think it means. I'm not talking about, overly structuring your day or your approach to problems, because that's not going to lead to creativity. But you can structure it in such a way that, for example, you have people who think differently than you. So in an invention session, figure out what fires up your creativity and set some time aside for that. And plan it. Put it into your schedule a few times a week. Also plan every day. Just make sure that your day is not so packed that you can't just take 15 minutes a few times a day and run down an idea that you had. While the idea is still fresh, while your brain is still sort of firing on the innovative side of the idea, that's a pretty good time to say, I'm taking a break from the other stuff that's boring and I'm going to invent. Another important piece is soak up anything that you find interesting. Now, it sounds weird, right? But you find things interesting for a reason. That's because, whether you know it consciously or not, problems and solutions don't always arrive in that order. A lot of the times you'll find a solution and it's in a field that you're interested in, and you haven't yet identified the problem you're trying to solve. Another important piece is failure. And I'm not kidding. Try some solutions that you think are likely to fail. If you have writer's block, start writing the middle of a paragraph. I mean, do things that are unusual for you, that you have not had success with before, because sometimes failing is the pathway to success. I know, sounds weird, but you have that Edison saying where he hasn't failed 10,000 times, he's discovered 10,000 things that don't work. Yeah, that. If you are a visual learner, draw things, visualize things. Sometimes it helps me to even play with scale models of things. However it is that you need to wrap your brain around this in a creative way, do that thing. Now, the next really important one is let your mind wander without the distraction of a screen. In fact, it's disappointing to me that I'll walk into coffee shops like Innovation Cafe, and everyone's like face down in line looking at their device, right? Well, you're not thinking, you're not free associating, your brain's not becoming disinhibited. You are solving a task that probably doesn't need solving, like a game. Instead, use some of that time to just let your brain work. Let it think about stuff. You don't need to be constantly dealing with input from a screen. Let's talk about play. Play like a kid. Play with stuff. Enjoy it. If you're working on finding a solution for something, have a little fun along the way. So I was working on something where I was putting a lot of electricity through resistance heating wires. And, I got a little bit bored. So I'm like, I'll bet you if I heat up a thin enough, nichrome wire, I can use it to cut through styrofoam. And it worked, and I was messing around with it. And it just made it more interesting. It also made me more comfortable with the subject matter I was working with because I got to play with the resistance heating wire to help me better understand it. Now, here's another one. Ignore bad advice. Okay, I've done another video on this, but do reinvent the wheel because the wheel is like the most valuable invention in history. Don't rule out the box. The box itself might be the solution. So when someone says think outside the box, reinterpret that as think about this in a different manner. Don't reinterpret it as, okay, well, whatever it is that people expect the solution to be, it can't be anything like that, because maybe the solution is what people expect it to look like. And don't rely on necessity. This idea that necessity is the mother of invention is wrong, flat out. A desire for a creativity, a desire to make something new, a desire to make the world a better place or to make your life better. Those are the things that drive creativity. Necessity, well, that drives like stealing and cheating and shortcuts. It's not really the mother of invention at all. Another one, stay on top of discoveries and news in areas that interest you. Now, for years, I would spend maybe, an hour a day just reading tech websites and, sort of tech news sites and looking up Wikipedia articles on things that I was interested in. And that wasn't, technically work time, but it was work time because that provided me with an enormous base of knowledge that I could draw on to solve problems. It's important. Another one, figure out your creativity enhancing places and activities and go there and or do them, right? There are certain things that you can do that really enhance your creativity, whether it's, going on a long car ride, it works for me, whether it's just sitting out and catching some sun, if it's going in a meeting and just saying, hey, whoever wants to stay after, I want to have a brainstorming session on this, figure out what's worked for you and do more of it. And finally, maybe one of the more important ones, don't be afraid to give up on something temporarily and let your brain work on it offline. We shouldn't try to work online with other people in the room on problems. I mean, how many times have you been in a meeting and someone's trying to work through a problem out loud and everyone else's time is being wasted, right? So it's okay in groups to work on things offline. It's also okay for your creativity to say, I'm going to work on this while I'm not thinking about it. And again, back to the subconscious, let your subconscious roll. So those are the principles of innovation as they stand today. I am sure that I'm going to add, I'm sure I'm going to subtract and modify. So watch this space. We'll be swapping some of them out probably. And man, I just have to say thank you. I love the opportunity to just set out what has driven my innovation. I mean, it's been a heck of a journey to 250 plus issued patents, I'll tell you that. I remember when I first got to 10, I was like, woo, this is a huge number. And, after a while, it just becomes sort of like your birthdays after you turn 50. You kind of don't really care to know. It doesn't matter anymore. But I love looking at how I got there, and I love looking at how you might get there and helping humans, everyone, squeeze every last drop of creativity out of the most creative force ever created, which is the human brain. So, signing off from Innovation Cafe, I'm Gary Schuster, your friendly neighborhood inventor, encouraging you to run with your ideas, let your subconscious loose on them, and solve some problems and make everyone's lives better. See you next time.